you can't help but think about the JonBenét case because it's, the other thing is, as I mentioned this in some of the other stories, like even the Menendez story, is that, you're alive during it, but you're like, oh yeah, the guys that killed their parents. And then you watch the documentary again and you're like, oh shit, I don't remember any of this, or I didn't know any of this. And the JonBenét documentary was a really informative and also a big time refresher because I was like, I remember the story.
But you're young and you're like, I don't know.
And you're like, I remember that when it started, I was like, oh yeah, so who ended up being arrested for that again? That's how and I was like, oh right, they never really got anybody for
I
that.
go back and forth on JonBenét at first. I've met the dad at CrimeCon, and a nice man, and I was in the green room with him, and he said, Susan, I think I'm fighting for that. Like in Delphi, I want the FBI to stay in certain jurisdictions, and I said, I understand. And at first I wasn't clear about what happened, or I didn't have a thought. And then I read a book on it and I thought, ooh, could it have been the son? And parents would, because I thought about it. I wouldn't stick up for my husband if he did this ever. Yeah. But if my daughter accidentally, would I stick up for the kids? So that's where my head went. But I don't know if we'll ever know. The note was odd.
The note's so odd.
There's
so what do you think of the
things.
note?
The placement. Well, first of all, her being in the home, the access to that home through that window, the note is beyond peculiar. But also seeing, take the father aside, seeing how I believed how distraught this mother was.
Me too.
And it just didn't register to me like that she was just being like, I got you. To him on this.
I know.
It's very peculiar.
I don't think we'll ever know, but I think something happened inside of that house, and I don't think we'll ever know what it is. I really don't. And it's horrible that Patsy passed away, and that he wouldn't you though, if there were suspicion on you, just kind of go away. He's still at CrimeCon. He's still out there. He wants it tested. He even came out and said recently, look, I think that I know what you're going to say.
What? I think, here's what I think, when the mind is very powerful, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, you know what I mean? But let's just say I did something terrible, and I could convince myself that I'm innocent. And I might believe that lie so much. I might go to church every day just to show other people how innocent I am.
I get it.
I might try to absolve myself of the sin by overcompensating. Someone find my daughter. Someone find my husband. I love
my
Tom
friend.
Segura so much.
Yeah. Before I came on here, I said I was going to talk about this. She's CSI, and I said, what do you think? Tell me. I won't quote you. She goes, quote me. I think it's the dad.
Well, there's a lot of people are doing what she said, which is, when they go, all right, well, submit for this. And they go, sure, I'll give you my DNA. And then the DNA is a match, that there is some DNA in this case as well that isn't a match for the father.
Right. And I think it depends on what documentary you watch, because my sister just watched one that John was leading, right? And so she said, there's no way. She said, Burke reminds me of Jack. My son's Jack, he's 8. There's no way he's going to kill. I said, well, what if it was accidental? And then they covered up. And she's like, I just think it's not true. And I'm not saying, I feel bad. If he is innocent, and think of the life and the hell he went through. But it's just bizarre, the note, that there's too many things. I don't know.
It's so bizarre.
So bizarre, but you're right about that. So Cheryl McCullum is her name. She works for Nancy Grace. She's the most amazing person. I love her. And she's like, Susan, this is Cheryl. She said, if I was looking for Caroline, her daughter, would I say, I found her? Or would I say, she picks up on things that I don't. And then there she was. When you say, oh my God, there's my son. But then I think back to do we put ourselves in that situation and think, how would we react? But the truth is, the Chris Watts, the Scott Peterson, they don't act right.
They don't act right.
They don't act right. And the dad, when he carried JonBenét's body, which I found
and
on
invited
TikTok,
all the friends over.
And then now that carries JonBenét's body out like this. Now, if you find your dead child, I would cradle. I don't give a fuck what evidence. This is not the way you carry the child you just found murdered on the floor. I would be to my body looking for life and holding it.
Yeah. And
I don't even hold my fucking dog, my cat like that.
Right. And you put yourself in the shoe. And yes,
No.
there have been situations where people have been accused and they didn't do it because we always think, oh, it's the closest to. But in the Delphi case, the grandfather, Mike, I say grandfather, he's like in his 60s. He's like, check me out, test me. You know, he's like, do what I know. They go to family first.
Yeah.
But with JonBenét, I think the fascination was, and I remember same thing as you mentioned, Tom, with the Menendez brothers. Even I knew them. One of them, Lyle, went to high school with my sister at Princeton Day School. I went to East Brunswick Tennis Club with them, and we knew the tennis pro Merrick. And it's funny because my dad remembers this. They stopped by. It was him and Lyle, the older one. And we weren't home. I was 14. I probably should have been hanging out with a 19-year-old tennis guy, right? But so they stopped by. We weren't there. And Merrick used to say to me, you know, Susan, you got to meet this Lyle. He's crazy. He'd pull up to Newark Airport in a Porsche and just leave it, and that's where he parked. And
my God.
He'd pay for the towing. So when it came out on People magazine and going to high school in Princeton, Chuck's was right near us. We ate there all the time, the restaurant they bought. Just like you said, you don't think about it. Thank God, murder wasn't my business at 17. I'm like, oh, really? They killed for money, and then you move on. But now that I think about it, they had access to all the money anyway. You don't kill your parents for an extra couple million.
No.
Was the shopping spree. I asked Ann Burgess. She testified in the first trial, and she said they had access. That was like a way of saying, you're gone. You know, and I also interviewed one of the jurors, Hazel Thornton from the first trial. She said to me, Susan, I'm like, tell me what it's like when you go back and you're talking. It's divide. And remember, 90s.
Yeah.
Men against women. Men were like, no way would a father abuse their kids sexually. No, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Boys. And are they gay?
That's what the men were saying.
Yes. And the women are like, not to say let them walk. It's a horrific crime, you saw.
Yeah.
But they were saying manslaughter. They'd be out by now. So that's the argument. Hazel has said to me, I've been on with her, and she's like, Susan, I'm not saying they should have walked. No one's saying that. But 35 years is enough. And considering the horrific abuse. And the DA, Gil Garcetti at the time, just lost OJ. So he's like, we can't, a lot of this is political. We can't lose this. No abuse is allowed in the second trial.
One of the most telling things was that in the documentary that came out recently about them, that the prosecutor, and prosecutors are always like, fucking lock this piece of shit
she's
up.
A Spitfire.
She's a real Spitfire. And she goes, that's the woman right there.
Where is she? Oh, yeah.
She goes, the day that guy died, the father, she goes, the world became a better place. So for the prosecutor to say that, you know, she was like, this guy, she goes, I couldn't find one character witness for the father. Not one.
Not even one he paid.
None.
Think about how much money he had. No one.
He must have been just a real fucking horrible guy.
Well, they have 20 family members, even on his side, who say, let these guys out. Like, that's why I believe. But when I was watching that, I remember being young and watching that and being like, ooh, I don't know about the sweaters. Like, and I don't think as a society we could wrap our brains around that would happen.
No, because I remember growing up and thinking like, oh, those two douchebags killed their
Me too.
rich parents, you know, because you don't think about that context for sure.
Think about it. But then
you shouldn't kill your mommy and daddy.
Ever.
I mean, there's a lot of people are abused, but geez Louise.
No, absolutely. I totally.
But they paid their debt to society.
I see what
now.
you're saying 100%, because my mom says that to me. Why do you have to talk about the Menendez all the time? And she goes, and they shot their parents. And I said, I know, Mom, but I said, I don't want to get into details. But if you watch the documentary about Menudo, and nothing against that industry back then, but now that we know what we know, what did he have access to and how evil was it? But I think, obviously, when they went to reload and shoot the mom.
There's a lot of hatred in there. Rage.
Rage. And, but I do think that they paid their debt to society. I truly believe that. And all of their family members, if they were even, you know, the father's family members. That's interesting that nobody liked the guy.
Not one. She goes, that's the reason. She goes, we couldn't even have a character witness brought to the trial because we couldn't find one.
I think people think money equals problem solved, and therefore, why would anyone with money do that? It hides a lot of things, I think. And I even think with the Ramseys, like, people are like, oh, no, that wouldn't happen. Look at the facade, like, look at the way they look and their house and the, you know, I think that, and I do that, I fall into that of like, well, they don't look like they should look. They don't look like Manson. What could possibly be wrong? But I think secrets are held tight inside of houses, and you never know. And that's part of the crime obsession. You're watching, you're like, 20, why would anyone?
It's all the questions. You have unanswered questions, of course.
And I don't know if we ever hear a why and go, oh, that makes sense.
But that's like this is like it's the reason why Hitchcock became a phenomenon. It's like you go, this thing happened, and then you want to piece it together. Everyone wants to piece things together. You want an explanation. You want the answer at the end.
Yeah.
And every time a crime occurs, it's a new question, right? And you go like, what? Like, it's
and
just
it's
this.
What I found. So the trial of Richard Allen in Delphi, it's a business. And so I saw ABC, NBC, they're swarming. They're swarming. And like, who's getting exclusives? And do you know the family? And can you get the and it's
and you guys all end up competing too, because Netflix puts out the doc, and then all of a sudden there's a Dateline special, and then there's a CNN special. Like, everybody has to do their story on it. Right?
I think you guys who paved the way, it's true. Last night I didn't realize how long you guys have been doing this, but you really did pave the way of different media. And what I love about you guys is people kind of talk about their feelings and talk about who they are. And at CNN, it's like teleprompter and anchor hair. And it's funny, Mr. Ball and I met with him about his charity. And I said, can I even say this, fuck? And he goes, I love that you said fuck. He goes, you have anchor hair, but we love you. So it made me laugh. I'm like, that's because of you guys. At CNN, I'd be like pulled off. But my point is, I think that you allow conversations to happen. And that's why I really love you guys, because it's authentic. And at CNN, I remember producers in my ear was like, Susan, I said, he's like, you're kind of funny. We like the commercial break, Susan.
Oh,
I'm like, but I can't do the commercial break, Susan. I'd like, it's like 3, 2, 1.
Sure.
Yeah. Pretend to be
coming
normal.
up tomorrow with the anchor voice.
Ooh, hey, Jeans, did you enjoy that highlight? Why don't you have one more click of fun around here? I don't know. Click here or here. Try it out. Have more fun. Why don't you subscribe? That way, every time a video drops, you can be notified. You can send it to your grandmother. You're not going to want to miss a moment of denim, okay? Try it out.